Hi, folks. You're at Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast, and listen to it in your truck or your car as you're driving along, or stick in those earbuds and listen to it on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about propaganda coming out of Germany. And this is, by the way, propaganda that's typical of sort of the Germanic-speaking peoples of Central Europe. You see pretty much the same propaganda coming out of Switzerland and Austria. So at the moment, so it goes something like this. Now, this particular one I saw, which stimulated me to do this video, or got me at least in the groove of thinking about it, was there's a young, very gay-looking guy in his, I suppose, mid-20s. Tight t-shirt, the whole gay thing. And he starts off talking about how there's just too many, mass migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, as he calls them, coming into Germany. It's just overwhelming things. And I thought, okay, we're off to a good start here then. All right, let's go with this. And then it cuts to how Germany's got a terrible racist, evil past. Neo-Nazis everywhere and so on and so forth. But now the good people of Germany have come forward to embrace mass migration, which is they should. And we need to understand, so this very gay guy says, we need to understand that this mass migration of millions of illiterate peasants from the third world is just absolutely natural. It's completely natural. It's as natural as taking a walk down the street. It's as natural as breathing the air. It's as natural as having a drink of water when you're thirsty. It is completely natural. There is nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to see here. This mass movement of people is just how things are. It's just how things are. The only problem is that Germany, so he asserts, Germany and others, by the way, I'm not singling him out in particular. I've heard this elsewhere, but is that Germany's taken in something in the order of 23 million refugees and asylum seekers over the last 10 plus years. And he actually jumps around a bit in the timeline, which is classic propaganda tactic of going back in the days of, say, the late 1950s, early 1960s, when Germany was taking in Turkish workers to do things like clean the toilets and all that sort of stuff. So he goes back that far, but then jumps back and forth across the timeline as it suits him to say, well, look at the neo-Nazis and so on. A lot of that's invented. A lot of that's made up of the supposed far right of Nazis everywhere. That's all a fabrication. But he makes his point that if you're against mass migration or question it or anything like that, you must therefore be a Nazi. So that's which is again a propaganda tactic employ that the globalists use quite ruthlessly and energetically and with much omnipresence. So he goes like this, that as long as Germany's going to be welcoming, as he puts it, to these third world peasants coming in, of which nothing can be done about, completely natural that they come, then this obligates, therefore, other countries to take in even bigger shares of these supposed refugees, because Germany's so generous, therefore you must be. We've proved that we're not Nazis by taking in all these black, brown, illiterate peasants. So you now have to prove that you're not Nazis by taking in even more illiterate black, brown peasants. I mean, the absurd proposition that this may work for primary school children or IQ 80 flunkies doing gender studies at university. I don't know who else would fall for this crap. So let's go back over this. The assertions made here. Firstly, he says that these people, these refugees or supposed refugees, have no choice. They have no choice. They are forced to come to the rich West. They are forced to travel many thousands of miles illegally, breaking endless amounts of laws, bribing public officials. They are forced to do this by, well, as he says, things like famine or something like that, political turmoil, civil war, invasion, and so on. So okay, well, let's look at that. Now, sure, and if there's a famine on and these sort of things, now, is it a self-inflicted famine? Is the government of that country or that region inflicted the famine to get at this or that tribe they don't like, because it's very tribal in these places. So they think we'll just create a famine over in that side of the country because that's tribe such and such, and we don't like that tribe, and we're in charge now, so we'll fuck them up. It's indirect genocidal sort of effort here, and that creates a lot of social distress. Hungry people, this sort of thing, people dying of hunger, even. And that is tragic. Yes, it's tragic. No question, it's tragic. No question, we should all be sympathetic and so on. But that government of that country inflicted it on its own people. Now, why does that make it the responsibility of another nation or any nation to take it on as their problem? Should there be international humanitarian food aids, via various agencies, the United Nations, for example, to alleviate the hunger and the starvation? Sure, that could. Oh, absolutely, no question about that. Should there be refugee camps set up that are well supplied with facilities such as food and shelter and so on? Absolutely, there should be that, no question. And that generosity should be extended. And should the rich countries have some sort of I think obligation is too strong a word. Should they have some sort of attitude to humanitarian assistance, such as refugee camps and so on? When I say refugee, I mean refugee from the hunger or the starvation or the government inflicted. Now, there's other options. Why is that tolerated? Why is this government allowed to inflict such hardship on its own citizens, even though the government said, well, we're one tribe and we're in charge, they're just a different tribe? The fact they're in the same political border as us, we don't care. We want to get rid of them. So why don't the international community step in and say create a separate state? I mean, for example, I'm not saying it should or shouldn't happen, but for example, why is there no effort made to solve the problem and deal with that? Why is that government allowed to stay in office if they're inflicting genocide on a different tribe, but nonetheless they're fellow citizens? Why is this even tolerated? Why is this government allowed to stay in? Why are they still being funded by the International Monetary Fund? Why does the International Monetary Fund not have strings attached? For example, I go to Western governments, say if you want any financial assistance or support or loans or anything like that, you better put mass LGBTQ in all the schools. Why is that same thing not inflicted on these other countries, these African countries, for example, that are doing this indirect, under the table genocide? Why not? Apparently it's not happening. Why is the United Nations all big, tough and powerful, all super hairy-chested when it's inflicting gay, lesbian stuff on white Western countries, but it seems to be utterly powerless and helpless, floundering like a little child that can't swim in the water, in the deep water, when it comes to getting African countries and governments to toe the line? But why are they so tough in one side and so powerless in the other? It makes you wonder. But anyway, should these people, should there be food aid given and things like that? I think it should. I mean, that's my view. Should refugee camp? Absolutely. And again, I think that should be. And the United Nations has a vast budget. The fact they spend most of it on pushing gay, lesbian, rainbow flag stuff rather than helping those who really need it, well, that's another discussion we can have. But anyway, this is these people who are affected by this, the crop failures, be it a drought or forced on them by government action or political action. There should be refugee camps, and there are many refugee camps nearby. So let's come to this idea: these people, these illiterate peasants, are forced to come to the West. They have no choice. They're forced. That's simply not true. That's an absolute lie. They have very extensive and substantial networks of refugee camps where they can go and they can receive free food, water, shelter, medical care, air-conditioned buildings. The list goes on, and then they can go back at some future point. When things calm down, they can go back to wherever it is they came from, their villages, and then they will receive additional substantial help in terms of help with irrigation wells, planting crops, all sorts of things they can get help with. So this idea they're being forced or have to move to the West is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It's simply not true, not even slightly true. Let's look at the other side now, where this gay guy was saying that these people, this is the illiterate peasants coming to the West, is a huge boon to the economy because the economy needs it. That's also an outright lie, absolute lie. The West, including countries like Britain, has something in the order of 40 to 50% of its workforce is either unemployed, as in working age people, is either unemployed or underemployed. So this idea there's a shortage of work is absolute nonsense. The next thing is that these people are bringing skills. No, they're not. They're illiterate peasants in rural, remote villages. They've got no skills. They've got, at best, they've had 2 years in some bullshit bush primary school. They're illiterate in their own language. They've got no skills, no work experience, qualifications, credentials. They've got nothing other than their cheap, black market under the table labour, perhaps, and that might be all. Or they're living like 20 or 30 to a 2-bedroom apartment and these sorts of things. But they bring no skills, so they bring nothing to the economy. It's this idea that there's some, they're essential to economic development. Again, absolute lie, absolute lie. This idea that the German economy needs these workers is also an absolute lie. If you look at the unemployment rate among particularly the third world migrants, less so others. Like, say there's a migrant that comes from, I don't know, Switzerland to Germany, for example, or comes from Austria, or there's a lot of Polish people speak good German. A lot of people in the Czech Republic speak pretty decent German. So if they come along, they're very similar cultures, not the same, but similar. They're kind of from a Judeo-Christian background. They speak the same language. Their education levels will be either similar or close. Then they do integrate and they do contribute and they do have skills. Even when East and West Germany integrated, merged after 40, 50 years or so of being apart, the West Germans found that the East Germans, not every single one of them, but the East Germans, the practical quality of their education and their work ethic and work habits and attitudes to work, attitudes to supervision, attitudes to accepting direction were very different from West Germans. And so unless they were cheap to employ, it often wasn't worth employing them. And that's people that speak the same language and same culture and so on, because the differences in attitudes are so great. Now, you amplify those differences when you come from a third world country, third world place in Africa, where they've got no work expertise. They've never worked. They've lived in a rural village where they've got no, they've got to walk a mile down the road to get water from the well. They've got no flushing toilets. They've got nothing they've got a culture where they don't go to bed until 2 a.m, due to the heat, and they don't get up until midday. These sorts of things, and these habits are very, very hard to break. The amount of Africans in Europe that still have those same habits, so they still want to get up at midday, and go to, and you see it in Australia as well. When those sort of people come here, they want to hang out on their porch, shouting and talking loudly and playing music till 2 a.m. This sort of thing. So this idea they're forced to come is again to the West or to Germany in this case, as the guy was saying, is of course nonsense. Nothing. They're not forced at all. What is happening, however, is that the people smugglers who are almost merged as one with the United Nations and the globalists and the people movement industry generally, they go around the refugee camps and they tell these people, look, you go to the West to take back what's yours, because the reason they're rich and you're poor is because they stole everything off you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the reason you're not driving a fucking Maserati, you don't have hot blonde chicks hanging off each arm, the reason you haven't got a waterfront fucking mansion and a private jet, and the reason is because Whitey stole it from you. You go to Whitey's country, just get back what's yours, because it's also attitudes that these peasant communities have, whether it's in Africa or elsewhere, where things are communally owned, because they're not wealthy, remember. So the idea of private ownership is really not something they understand. I mean, other than say a personal effect, like the clothes on your back or something. But they also have this view of communal ownership and communal sharing. So if somebody catches because they're hunter gatherers still in a lot of these places, they catch fish or this, or catch some animal, they hunt some animal, they'll share it with the tribe or the village or the family. And that's just how they do it. And when you've got scarce resources, that sharing tends to take place in those societies, whereas in richer societies, private ownership is a bigger issue. So when they come to the West, they have, well, look, you guys have got so much. Why won't you share it with me? It must be because you hate me. It must be because you're a racist. And the gender studies academic who met me when I came off the illegal boat there told me that anyone that doesn't give me whatever I want is a Nazi. That sort of. So you've got those sort of things playing into the overall understanding and architecture and practical effect on the ground of things. So these are the lies and the idiocy that's being put around, that these third world people have no choice. But in fact, no, they can easily get looked after in the locality that they're already in quite easily. The causes of the problems that's creating, if you like, the knock-on effect of things such as a famine and so on, that could easily be alleviated and dealt with, but it's not being so. And so as people are moved around almost to a plan, I would argue, and then they go to these refugee camps and then exhorted by the people movement industry, of which the United Nations and so on plays a very big part. Look at the German funding of the Mediterranean boats to illegally move black, brown peasants from Africa into Europe. Germany plays a very prominent role in funding that. As far as I can tell, it's illegal, yet nothing seems to happen to these activists who are doing it. So, and if they are arrested, an activist judge is found to hear the case that releases them straight away. So this is nothing to do with these poor people. They're being forced, and the refugees, asylum seekers, nothing of the sort. That's absolute bullshit. There is a mass people movement industry, and there are numerous propagandists such as this guy, running around justifying it. But we need to understand that it's being forced on us in the West, and it's without our consent, and it's all completely unnecessary. You've been a task today. You're a Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.